don't give enough light. And even the members, when we were going around, they were asking us whether there is any technical person who can make them longer. That is to give light to the market, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I just wanted to caution that good comment and recommendation you want to make, that an engineer to correct that, it is not part of recommendations.
Mr. Speaker, was an additional.
The committee on implementation will deal with the recommendations as they are, not as you think they should be.
But Mr. Speaker, I think you can allow us now to add whatever was not given there, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you.
Noted. Honorable Mbula.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to clarify on something we had to find out as a committee. On the issue, what the member who has just sat down, the member Kalawa has said, or the issue of the height. We consulted the relevant people, and they said that they cannot add the size. I mean the height, the height, the length, but they can add more flashlights. I think something like that. Yeah, they can add more, but they cannot add the height. So that's why we could not put it in the recommendations, because we had to find out. They said the only thing they can do is to add more floodlights, but they cannot add the height of the floodlights. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kakwaya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for giving me this chance. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've checked the recommendation on this report pertaining street lights. Although the committee have said there is difference between the street lights and the floodlights, one thing we should talk about is about the present. It should be 100 watts. If the battery is not enough, let the right battery of that solar light be the correct one. Because when they just write somewhere, it is substandard. What is substandard? We need the standard thing to be put in those markets. Mr. Speaker, let us address the present, not the future, what will be done. We don't know whether the next budget will be budgeting for street lights. Maybe we'll be budgeting something else. But what has gone wrong, let it be corrected right now. Mr. Speaker, I oppose. Thank you.
What was your point of information, member of that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because of the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, looking at the specifications that are listed here of the type of floodlight or lamp that was supposed to be installed, Mr. Speaker, and looking at the cost that was used to install one floodlight, Mr. Speaker, it is quite evident that that lamp cannot light brighter than it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's also very evident that the height of that lamp cannot go beyond the specifications that were given here, simply because the quality or the level at which it can light when lifted higher than where it is, Mr. Speaker, will amount to no light at all at the ground, Mr. Speaker. So it is important, Mr. Speaker, as we contribute and give our submissions, that members know the specifications that we have here, the cost of doing the lamp. For example, Mr. Speaker, on the Mulika Mwizi at the bigger markets like Wote and Kibwezi and the other markets, Mr. Speaker, is priced at almost 1 million shillings, Mr. Speaker. And it's such a big mast that can illuminate in a larger area within the town, Mr. Speaker. But for these smaller ones, these solar-powered lamps, Mr. Speaker, the cost and the specifications that were given here, it's quite evident that the contractor did what was required. Thank you.
You cannot say when you make it longer, it won't light up our markets well. You are not an engineer. The last time I checked, you said you are a teacher in a certain school. So let the engineers do their work, Mr. Speaker. And that is the information I wanted to pass to my learned friend, Honorable Maida. Thank you.
Member for Mavindini, then member for Nzawi Kilikalamba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to oppose this motion, and I oppose on principle. Because, Honorable Speaker, this report is very good, with very brilliant recommendations. And I like the recommendations aspect. Only that, the report by itself lands us in darkness when you read it clearly. Because, Honorable Speaker, the second paragraph talks about the installation of floodlights contract having been terminated. Because as they say, in the year 2016, the department contracted the installation of floodlights contract number this to technology benchmark at a contract sum of this. Later, they talk about it was terminated. But as you read through the document, there is nowhere where they are showing us that the contract was given to someone else. So, with all these recommendations that they are done badly, they are done halfway, they are being done by who? Because from where they did the executive summary, we left the contract having been terminated. So who is doing it? Because in case we make a recommendation here that they be repeated, from this document, who will repeat? Because I know where in my document, unless you ask a name of the contractor who is redoing after the termination and for what amount, then it means that the whole of this document is ambiguous.
Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, earlier, a BQ and the relevant documents that Honorable Kimongo is talking about were presented. And I have a copy of the same here with me today. And I need to clarify that after the termination, the contract was awarded to a number of contractors. The document was previously tabled in his house, and I seek to clarify the following: that we had around 6 contractors after termination, whereby we had Lot A, Lot B, Lot C, Lot D, Lot E, and Lot F. All those are various contractors who did the final installations. Thank you, Mr.
And thanking the member for Emali for having brought this statement, the Speaker, which prompted the committee to undertake this exercise and do this report. The Speaker, I would suggest that we had one more recommendation, that in the future, when the House is undertaking such a serious oversight exercise, which is of a technical nature, the Speaker, is important and it is prudent that this House seeks the services of an expert in this field. Because, Mr. Speaker, all of us who went out to check on these things, Mr. Speaker, all of us, none of us is an expert on these things, Mr. Speaker. And I think an expert opinion should have enriched this report, Mr. Speaker. My second recommendation, Mr. Speaker, on this report, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about the solar lights. We also have the floodlights which are connected to the national grid, Mr. Speaker. And I think all of them serve the same purpose. And it's also important that we had a rider in this report on the same, Mr. Speaker. When we narrow down in my case, Mr. Speaker, occasionally, 2 of my markets are connected to electric solar floodlights, Mr. Speaker. And most of the times, occasionally, they are disconnected, Mr. Speaker, for non-payment of the bills by the department. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we experience long periods of darkness, Mr. Speaker, because of this element of non-payment. So we should have a recommendation in this report, Mr. Speaker, indicating that in the future, the department should be prompt enough to make payments to Kenya Power. Mr. Speaker, lastly, these floodlights, the solar floodlights were installed sometimes, in my case, they were done on Sunday, Mr. Speaker, in a market known as Kadhatu, in my local market, Cheko, in another market known as Makutano and Katulia. Mr. Speaker, it's very saddening to note that yesterday night, the ones at Kadatu are not working. 3 days after installation, Mr. Speaker. The reason, technically, I may not tell. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we relook into the issue of the contractors who are given some of these works. Mr. Speaker, speaking from...
What is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, sir, is the member in order to support this motion, and later he debates in a manner whereby he says that the solar lights in his markets are not working, and he is addressing in future something should be done. While I think a remedy should be done to make sure that the lights are working right now. Is supporting, and when he's debating, is disputing or going contrary to what he was saying in the first place. Thank you.
Member Fonzawe, under the rules of debate, you are either supporting or opposing. If you qualify that lights installed in your area 3 days ago, they have gone off, admit and say, but in future, when they put others, they should not go off.
Mr. Speaker,
you can't have a cake and eat it.
Mr.
Stick
Speaker,
to the side of a debate.
Mr. Speaker, I would not wish to have my cake and eat it at the same time. And I stated, Mr. Speaker, that I'm supporting this report. I'm only pointing out at an abnormality, Mr. Speaker, because the lights were put in place, they were working, but yesterday one of them was not working. And I think it's not a mistake to point out that in the future, we need to relook into the issue, Mr. Speaker. So I'm not contradicting myself. Mr. Speaker, I'm supporting the report.
Honorable Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to inform honorable members that we have this report, and we went out, Mr. Speaker, to oversight and get views from the public and the PMC. And Mr. Speaker, everywhere I went, Mr. Speaker, the citizens were not satisfied with the flood. In fact, they are not floodlights. They said they are lamps, actually, not street lights, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is the duty of this assembly to declare this report insufficient, Mr. Speaker, based on the recommendation.
Honorable Mwoki, your point of information has come up to where you said lamps.
Mr. Speaker,
I will contribute later, Mr. Speaker. If you wish to contribute,
then I'll do that, Mr.
Take
Speaker.
your seat and come back and take a position.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Don't hide between the information and a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Tangi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker is the honorable member from Mavindeni in order to insinuate that this report should not be accepted in this house, and that he moved in various wards, only when we know that he only visited 2 wards, and there are 30 wards in Makueni County. Can visiting 2 wards out of the 30 wards actually make him believe that we should not accept this report, Mr. Speaker?
The point of order. Restrict yourself to the point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I said all of us went to different wards, Mr. Speaker, and the cry from the people is the same, Mr. Speaker, because I had an opportunity to go through the reports from the wards, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose the motion. Mr. Speaker, looking at, first of all, the literature in the summary, as somebody has said, there was a contract that was given to somebody and it was later terminated after assessment. And Mr. Speaker, we don't know, this is just theory, that 6.2 million was paid, but we cannot match it against the work that we saw on the ground, Mr. Speaker. So we need attachments here, and attachments to show that another contractor is in place, Mr. Speaker, so that we can believe that this work is going to continue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have no technical know-how, Mr. Speaker. Some of us are teachers, doctors, pastors, Mr. Speaker. When we go to look at lights without BQ, without anybody who can interpret the BQ, we are just looking with our eyes. We cannot tell. Like something I saw at your village, Mr. Speaker. And I sympathized with the residents of Kadato Market. I understand the lamps have been put in place. However, Mr. Speaker, I'm not interested in the information. However, they are not working. We don't know if this is the same shoddy contractor who is doing what he has been doing, Mr. Speaker. So the residents are crying that this work was not well done. And so, Mr. Speaker, personally, I have not seen the BQ, so I don't know if they did what was in the BQ. And if so, why did the department want such kind of lamps in the market? Mr. Speaker, when I'm going home, I pass through Shimo Estate. There is a floodlight there, Mr. Speaker. I think that is what we should be thinking about. It's very bright. The mast is very tall. And I believe that is exactly what the department intended to have, though I have not seen the BQ. Mr. Speaker, what I saw when I went round, I went with Honorable Fonzawi and for Muvau. The only place we found the lights on, they were very dim, Mr. Speaker. In fact, I don't know if at night they can illuminate the whole market, Mr. Speaker, although there are a number of them, but I don't think that is what we call floodlights, as some people have said here. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I want to oppose, because the recommendation of this committee that in future we should have a good design and high quality, Mr. Speaker. It is not in future. That is what should have already happened, Mr. Speaker. And I want to oppose this motion on that basis, Mr. Speaker.
I will reluctantly propose the question. Honorable members, I propose the question that pursuant to provisions of Standing Order number 116, the debate be now adjourned. Member for Kako Wai Award.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the adjournment, Mr. Speaker, so that that committee can go back to the drawing board, Mr. Speaker, and bring a good report, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it is better if they can consult the electrical engineer, who is Engineer Mwema, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I, as electrical technician, Mr. Speaker, I should also be consulted, Mr. Speaker, so that I can read the BQ to them very well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was seated, I was shown a BQ which specified that the battery which was supposed to be installed, it is NS 100, whereby the battery which I saw at my place, it was NS 70, which implies, Mr. Speaker, what was installed, it was not the right thing, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the adjournment so that they can bring the right thing, Mr. Speaker.
That pursuant to provisions of Standing Order number 116, the debate be now adjourned. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as have a court of opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, time now being 16:55 hours. The House stands adjourned until Tuesday, 9th of April, year 2019 at 14:30 hours.